Good morning, brothers and sisters. My warmest welcome to our podcast, Creativity and Crisis. My name is Dr. Glenn T. Martin. For a number of years, I've been president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, an organization working to address our planetary crises and to establish an enduring and liberating human future. I'm also a philosopher by profession who loves thinking and creative vision and inspiring ideas. My newest book is called Design for a Living Planet, the Earth Constitution Solution. In these podcasts, I engage in dialogue with prominent thinkers, scholars, and activists who are similarly concerned about the multitude of crises confronting humanity. Are there creative and practical solutions, and how can these solutions be achieved? I hope our listeners will both stay with us and join us in the thought processes that have become an utterly necessary part of our quest to create a decent planetary civilization for everyone. My guest today is Dr. Ervin Laszlo. He needs no introduction for most of us. He's a world-famous thinker and author of many books. He's the president of the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research, the founder and president of the Club of Budapest, and a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. He's recipient of many prizes, many peace prizes. He's recipient of 4 PhDs from major universities, and he's been nominated twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm delighted to have you with us today, sir, and welcome to Creativity and Crisis.
So this is a crisis, like the other crises. I don't think they are qualitatively different. Quantitatively, yes. I think this is a crisis of global proportion. It can be global because we are now all so tightly interconnected and interdependent as never before. So whatever is happening to one part of humanity is also affecting, and is practically happening also in a sense of non-locality, is happening also to all the other parts. So it is the first consciously known, perceived global crisis. And it's a tremendous challenge because now for the first time that we perceive that there is such a situation, then we can ask ourselves, what do we do about it? And I think that this question is being raised, and it's raised in a global context. I think it's a very important development, which augurs well, actually, for the future.
Yeah, one of the things that you probably know, I've written about a great deal is the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. And my organization tries to unite the Earth under that principle of unity and diversity. In your world, in your book, How Can We Build a Better World? You talk a little bit about the Westphalian system and the danger of this concept of sovereignty, which creates a patriotism. You call it a false patriotism there.
Well, we have to rethink all the values connected with our organization as a species. We are a social species, as Aristotle already said, and the social beings, and we now have the task of acting as such, creating a system which is not stopping with this artificial boundary of the nation state, as though the nation state would be a God-given unit that we cannot transcend. Nation state is one of the levels of organization. I don't think we can do away with it, or we need to do away with it, but it has to be built into a hierarchical sequence of systems within systems. And the largest level system is the global system, which includes all of the human family, plus includes all of life on Earth. I think that finally that is the system that has to be our objectives. That's the system to maintain. That's the system to care for. Then whatever other system there may be above it, interplanetary communication, that's still a gray area. I'm convinced that it might come, it will come. We don't know when. But for now, I think the global system is the key element.
Yeah,
is the objective and the purpose of our existence.
In my forthcoming book, and I want to apologize that my publisher just sent you a request for an endorsement for that book. She got so excited when she heard we were going to be talking here. But in my forthcoming book, I use your term holarchy. You know, one of the things you've talked about in systems is that systems go from small fractal entities to larger and larger holarchies, and that the world is a system in that way. And I argue, and you know, I make the argument there that the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, that you may know was written by hundreds of world citizens working together at the end of the 20th century, that this constitutes that kind of a holarchy, that it unites human beings under the democratic principles, and you know, gives us collectively the authority to end war and to really address the environmental crisis in all sorts of ways, including you know, I argue the transformation of consciousness, which is so fundamental, that people have to begin thinking holistically in a very deep way. Um,
That's what I'm talking about, the new paradigm.
yes,
It's a fundamental change in the change on how we see the world, how we think of ourselves, how we perceive our interests and our future in the world. All that has to be rethought because evidently and obviously, the way the dominant majority, at least of the decisive majority of humanity, has been thinking about these things is not no longer functional, it's obsolete. And it has led to crisis. I don't think that it has directly led to a virus crisis, but indirectly, yes, because even the virus crisis is very likely, as we don't have the 100% proof, very likely due to the fact that we're interfering with natural balances in nature. We were liberating a virus that was in symbiotic interaction with wild animals in nature, but when we started using those animals, taking those animals for nourishment, then it enters the human system.
yes,
That is one explanation. But whatever it is, I think the problem, the crisis that we face is due to our not no longer respecting, abiding by, and aligning with the natural order of things. And I think your planetary federation needs to take into account that it is a federation within the larger federation of life in the
yes,
biosphere, and
absolutely.
we are all in that together. And we have the laws that create systems in the universe and on Earth, living systems on Earth, apply to us individually and collectively.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I also write about are those many environmental economists like Hermione Daly and Jeremy Rifkin and so on, who talk about the end of the growth model of capitalism, the end of capitalism in that sense that we just cannot keep growing on a finite planet, growing in terms of the number of people, the amount of production, the amount of resources that we're using, and that we have to be thinking in terms of the transformation to the quality of life rather than thinking in terms of life as quantity. And it would seem that in terms of your focus on the need to be have a sense of the balance with the harmonies of the ecosystem of the planet, that would correspond with what you're talking about as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
because this is for me, it's a long familiar topic and problem. The way you're posing it is exactly the way I've been thinking about it. The book Limits to Growth by the Meadows, a couple has written, I think, in 1972.
Right.
Uh, was something that, or the Club of Rome, that I've been involved with the Club of Rome since that time. And I've written several reports for the Club of Rome, and then before creating the Club of Budapest. And that's the idea with the Club of Rome was exactly what you enunciate yourself now, and to shift from a quantitative unrestricted growth model to a qualitative growth, which is actually an improvement, a transformation, a natural product, because I think a natural process, because I think part of the laws that govern behavior, whether we discover them or not, or whether we state them or not, um, include the creation of larger and larger complex entities in an integrated form,
Yes.
integral and integrated form. And this growth of complexity and coherence, but I nowadays, at that time, I didn't call it coherence, but now increasingly I think of it in terms of the defining characteristic of the system that we need to put in place is its internal and external coherence. I really don't like the term external too much because nothing is really external to the
Yeah.
system. We're all part of the system. However, within, it would say intra-skin and extra-skin coherence, if you like. We are all have to be coherent as a society in among ourselves and coherent with other societies and create a federation, as you say.
I have a chapter in my new book on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which, if if one studies them as I have, is one sees that some of them are quite excellent. The elimination of extreme poverty, the working together to end carbon emissions, and so on. But my criticism of those goals is that they're within a context, the UN context, that assumes the growth model. They even speak about, some of the goals even speak about growth, the need for economic growth in order to address these goals and so on. And of course, the other part of my criticism of the UN model is the insistence on sovereign nations, so that the UN really has no authority over the nations to disarm them and to begin a transformation into a coherent world federation system.
I have worked for the UN for 7 years at one time. As I got involved with the Club of Rome, and then I was offered a fellowship and then a directorship of a program of cooperation at UNITAR, which is the UN Institute for Training and Research. So I well realized the problems that are faced in the UN. I've been saying at the time, and I can say it any time now too, because it's still true, the very term United Nations is a contradiction in terms. Namely, nations, if they claim themselves to be sovereign, cannot be united.
Right.
They can cooperate, but they cannot be united. We have to say goodbye to the idea of sovereign nations. Sovereignty is only the whole system.
Yes.
It's vested only in that whole system that I mentioned. Human life plus all life together is sovereign. But all the rest, we are part of that, and we need to be aligned so that just as the cells in our body cooperate to keep our organism alive, as shown by Prigogine and microbiologists and biochemists and all, so the nations and people of the world need to cooperate to keep that system going and developing. Not necessarily growing, but going, I would say,
Yes. One of the things that people object to when I talk about World Federation is they're worried about the loss of diversity, the loss of respect for individuality. The Earth Constitution itself does recognizes sovereignty as belonging to the people of Earth, right? Not the nations. It takes that away from the nations, but it does not abolish the nations. The nations become like states within the United States or Pradesh within India. They become administrative units within the Federation of Earth. The preamble to the Constitution talks about unity in diversity. And it seems to me that that's a fundamental principle. Maybe it's included in the notion of coherence, and I would say it is. That the unities, if they're genuine unities, do not abolish the parts. They enliven the parts. They make the parts coherent. Is that make
Well, I
sense?
mean, and any notion of system as as part of evolution, as not an artificial, but as a natural product of evolution, includes the very fact that the elements remain conserved. The elements, the parts have individuality. That's what gives the system its multiplicity, its diversity, its variety. We cannot simply conceive of a large, complex system without the internal differentiation. Then it would be a monolithic mass, an
Yes.
aggregate, a heap, not a system.
Right.
Systems are diversified. They have unity in diversity, just as you say.
I know that you publish book after book after book that try to appeal to people, and one of the things that is included in some of your works is the concept of love. In fact, I've quoted in some of my own writings, I've quoted from the Self-Actualizing Cosmos, that book of yours, where you talk about, you don't see how humanity can succeed in this without love. And I wonder if you could explain a little about your concept of love and how that could work and should work, because love is somewhat a different concept from system, right? We need a coherent system for the world, but we need love as well. How do those two things go together and reinforce each other?
Coherence already means that the parts are coherent. If the parts would be all the same, they would need to be coherent. I mean, then they become just one. But the parts are a multiplicity. And I'm very white-headian, in this respect.
I see.
Also
Yeah.
in other respects. I think these actual entities that arise are built as an integration of the elements, and they are not monolithic ones, monolithic heaps or units. Love to me is, in this sense, which is unconditional and unrestricted and universal laws, is the expression of our sense of belonging to the system, not as an indiscriminate, self-effacing unit that just goes under in the context of that larger system, a larger whole, but as a part of the system. I take the organism, the living organism, as one kind of complex, coherent system. You can't imagine the human system without all those thousands of kinds of species, or of cells, rather, that make it up. We need all the differentiation of those cells.
Yes. Yeah.
Without it, we wouldn't have a functioning system. We might have a blue-green algae as a kind of a mass, on
Right.
Earth, but not an evolving system. So I think it's absolutely necessary. We have to have diversity and unity, as you say. And we must respect that. On the global level, it's for the first time that we encounter the limits, the consequences of our failure to respect that unity in diversity,
Yes.
that belongingness. We need cooperation here. Every cell must cooperate with every other cell to keep the organism alive. Every human being must cooperate with every other human being to keep societies and ecologies functional. Love is simply the expression, to me, or the personal, subjective expression of what we feel when we encounter other members of the system to which we belong. We feel our belongingness. Lots of talk today, a very vague talk, but meaningful after all, about oneness, about feeling, the sense of being one, manifesting ourselves as being part of each other. And that's a very good point, because it's not just idle wish fulfillment. We find in the quantum disciplines that the entire universe is built up on very close connections, non-local connections between elements. And if a system is operative, is functional, it's because it's in multidimensional, thorough connection with other systems. And the sense, the feeling of that connection can be translated as the feeling of love.
I see. Excellent. I like that very much myself, that idea. In terms of the Earth Constitution, that you may know, I'm president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association that promotes ratification of the Constitution for the Federation of Earth, and I've been doing this for many years. This work, and I think my personal view is that it integrates with your vision and your work. I'd like your responses about this too. And I have a specific question. One of the things that the federation that is created under the Constitution does is give us enforceable world laws, democratically legislated by the World Parliament. And as you know, and I know, the United Nations has such a things called international laws, but they're treaties. They're really treaties that are unenforceable, especially over individuals. There's no law over individuals. That even with the International Criminal Court, there's very little responsibility of individuals on the international level among nation states. And I have said in some of my writings that a good law, democratically legislated world law, itself is a form of love. Because if we manage to unite humanity politically and economically, my argument is that we will feel part of one another, and law will not be taken, as it often is now, as something oppressive, but it'll be something that can empower us, because we're all on the same page. We have regulations about emissions in factories, and regulations about weapons, and all kinds of things that need to be universalized in our planet.
I fully agree. It's a bit of a situation of a chicken and the egg, because we need the laws to have this kind of federation come about so that people can also feel their connection to each other and act like it. But we also need the sense of belonging to the system so that we can have the laws, so that we can accept the working with the laws. So someplace we have to break through this chain of the catch-21, as it were.
Yes.
And I think it comes really with the individual mentality changing, the mindset changing, the people beginning to realize that we are not this mechanical aggregate, externally related, if at all, to the world around it and to other societies, that we are really organic parts of each other. That is there in indigenous cultures, as you well know.
Yes.
It is there, I think, in all of these spiritually oriented cultures, especially in the East, but also in Africa, also in Latin America. The Western technological world has kind of disregarded this deeper element and just thought we can do whatever we like as long as it makes money. And
Yeah.
because when it makes money, it gives us power and it gives us what we want. And what we want in life is things that money can buy. And this has disrupted and decohered the system around us to such an extent that we are subject to pandemics. We'll be subject to climate change, to immigration crisis, to aridity, to the rise of sea levels, flooding habitable areas. A lot of dozens of global crises could emerge because of our disregard of the larger system,
Yes.
which we must take care of to maintain that system. Otherwise, we ourselves cannot maintain ourselves.
Yes, yes. One of the things that I've used, I used it in my 2018 book called Global Democracy and Human Self-Transcendence, and it's an image that comes from Ken Wilber's work called AQUAL, AQUAL. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen it at some point, but he divides all of human existence into scientific development, individual spiritual development, cultural development, and institutional development. And he gives a historical series. We've gone from archaic societies through God King societies, through and so on. And we're all moving in all four of these dimensions toward holistic societies, he argues in that. I adapted that image in my book to try to show that in the institutional development, right, where we have moved from various feudal societies into nation state societies, I try to show in the book that the institutions of capitalism and sovereign militarized nation states interfere with our development in the other three quadrants. They interfere with our subjective growth toward real maturity, toward a sense of oneness with one another. And they interfere with culture too, with their propaganda, their national patriot propaganda and their militaristic propaganda and so on. And I'm wondering if you have a sense of that too, that the systems by which we are today operating, capitalism is still dominant and the militarized sovereign nation system is still dominant, that these actively interfere with our ability to realize the system that we're part of, the system that we're in, the love that we're talking about, because we're all part of one another.
I think actually I would not say that we can be complacent. We can sit back because the system is growing in that direction. The global direction is growing only in economics and technology and information flows, but the culture of that system and the value system behind it is not going in the right direction. We can be thankful for somebody who is enunciating the blocking factor, and that nobody did that as well as Donald Trump. When he says America first, then he blocks the development. And that's why it makes perfect sense for him to withdraw the US from the Paris Accords on climate change, because America has to just look after its own interests. And as long as nation states are selfish, self-centered entities, which by the very notion of sovereignty attaching to them, they are, as long as that is the case, then there could be no smooth progression beyond the nation state.
Yeah. Well, I think I think that's that's clear to me as well. That how are we going to transcend this institutionalized system that is there in the UN and is there in all the militarism of the world, industrial military complexes of the world, and so on. It may interest you that India, where we have a lot of support, we're now working on a session of the 15th session of the Provisional World Parliament. Under the Earth Constitution, we've held a number of provisional world parliaments trying to jumpstart a world system of federalism. And the 15th session is going to be in New Delhi. If COVID pandemic allows it, it'll be next December in New Delhi. And by the way, I'd like to invite you if you're interested in coming. It's it would be wonderful to have you there. But what we're saying to the government of India, which you may know is trying to become another member of the Security Council, what we're saying to the government of India is that given the tremendous spirituality of the Indian culture, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, all human beings are brothers and sisters. Given this, and given the history of India, rather than try to become another member of the Security Council, why don't you go to the UN and say, we need to replace the charter with a real federal constitution for the earth and integrate all the valuable agencies of the UN into that new federation. And so we're putting pressure on the government of India, hopefully to do that kind of thing. And so we're
extremely promising approach. For a number of years, I've been chairman of the Auroville Committee, which was trying to create and visited Auroville regularly twice a year and lived there for a while. And this is trying to create a city which doesn't belong under the sovereignty of India and the nation state, but is a human city. It's a global city belonging to all people.
I've been there, yes.
Good. Yes, I mean, this is extremely interested as a living example, as a living expression of an ideal. I am hopeful that these goals that you stand for, the Constitution and the move toward a more integrated, coherent global level system, that these goals becoming more practicable now that the existing system has shown itself to be prey to crisis. People don't connect the dots then and saying that it was our fault to create the virus crisis, the health crisis. But we see that in general, the crises that we live through that are on the horizon also, and they're very much discussed, as you know, that all these are somehow related to the fact that we have moved out of the balance of a well-balanced, equilibrated system. We have moved
Yes.
into a very aggressive, artificial, arbitrary system where we come first and we count altogether, and the rest are only in the background. So that is cause for a serious change, a fundamental change. First of all, in the way we think, the way we value, the way we feel, and this is the what I call for always the new paradigm based on findings in quantum physics, but on the new biology altogether, new psychology, where we
Yes.
don't have absolute demarcations. We have lines that are thresholds, but they are
Yes.
not demarcation lines. They are not watertight boundaries of things. So that is a new way of looking at the world, which is very old because I think the great cultural traditions of India, of China, of Japan, of Africa, of Latin America, they've had these. All indigenous people have this tradition of
Yes.
seeing themselves as being part of nature, part of this larger whole. So I am sanguine now that is a shakeup caused by the virus pandemic, that there is a rethinking coming about, which will rethink, among other things, as you do, the sovereign concept of a sovereign nation state as the uppermost authority on,
Yes.
on living Earth.
Yeah. We're working in the same direction. I'm really delighted, you know. And I think our half an hour is up
Yeah.
of discussion. It has gone so fast, and I've enjoyed talking with you so much.
Well,
Um,
you are doing a marvelous work, and I'm delighted to have the chance to talk with you. We need these ideas now more than ever, and we have better chances for realizing them than we ever had before.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is why the crisis, that the health crisis, is in some respects a blessing in deep disguise, obviously.
Yeah. Deep disguise. Yes.
We have to somehow overcome the negative consequences, the really what are side effects. This crisis shows that we cannot survive on this planet as independent entities,
Right.
only looking for after our own interests, competing. We have to cooperate, and create larger units. And finally, I think this all systems notion, the holistic notion, all these, the Whiteheadian notions, they're all coming back into relevance. Now, practical relevance. So what do we do now? Hopefully we pull out of the worst of this crisis. And then the question is, how do we reconstruct ourselves? Going back to what we had, and the possibility of other dozens of crises being on the horizon. And are we ready to create more fundamental change, starting with each other? As Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. If
Absolutely.
that would spread this notion, then this is what I'm dedicated to showing. Then I think we can really start a new era in human history, a better era.
Excellent. Excellent.
And your work, I should add, is the charter is extremely relevant to this, and I'm happy to support it in any way I can.
Well, thank you. My publisher, as I mentioned to you, just sent you an email asking for with a copy of the book. We have a galley, a digital galley out. If you would like to take a look at it and write an endorsement, I would be absolutely delighted.
I offer to do so.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking with you. God bless. May God bless us
Thank
all.
you.
Okay.
Same to you.
To our listeners, I hope you have enjoyed today's dialogue about establishing a living future for the earth and for all future generations. Our podcast has been recorded, and the link will be streamed to multiple social media outlets and posted on my own website at oneworldrenaissance.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to this exciting conversation. You can email me at gmartin@earthconstitution.world. This podcast has been made in association with Everscope Multimedia. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and that you will join us in Creativity and Crisis at the same time and place next week. Goodbye for now, be well, and God bless.